Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Get Booked. Hey Jennifer, what are we talking about today?
We've got 2 squares on our book bingo. So our first one is about Black voices, because it's Black History Month. And our second books that we're going to talk about is from our romance square, because Valentine's Day is coming up.
Cool. Do you want to go first?
Is that a trick question?
Also, Black History Month really is every month.
It is. Okay, so my first book, actually no, we talked about the square social justice. So my 2 books are talking about that.
Do we want to define what social justice is real quick?
Go for it.
Okay. Ooh, on the spot. So, social justice books are usually books that are caught up in the Black Lives Matter movement, or they are caught up in the whole idea of racism is a problem in America, and if it's a fiction book, then a lot of times the characters are dealing with those struggles, and so these books were kind of not really meant as like a teaching moment, but just kind of showing you a different experience that's probably not your own if you're definitely a white reader or viewer. So social justice is basically like kind of like the big one everyone talks about is the hate you give, which is very much like a, yes, Black Lives Matter movement. There is actual protesting in there. There's also like racism at school. There's like a racism as far as like, you know, a cop killing a black kid who didn't have a gun. So that's like a very large in-your-face type book. But there's also some more subtle issues that we're going to talk about in some of our books as well. So, Jennifer, with that, would you like to talk about your first book, which I almost grabbed but didn't, because I knew you like it a lot.
I actually haven't read this one, but it's on my to-read list.
Oh, okay. I feel like we've talked about it. So.
I feel like we have too.
Yeah.
It's The Voting Booth, and the tagline is "Make It Count." So his name is Duke, and Duke, obviously it's a voting book. Duke wants to vote. There's a problem with his ballot, and Marva is, she's underage, so she can't vote, but she's done a lot of work to help people, like, talk about the vote, sign them up to vote, you know, get everybody's voice heard.
So is she like a grassroots organizer kind of thing?
Yeah, she works for
an organization?
Yes,
okay.
I think so. I don't know if she works for them or if she volunteers for them, but she's involved in that. And she sees his vote, like, not counting, and she's like, no, this is going to work. And I think this takes place, like, over 24 hours. I can't remember if that's true or not true, because I haven't read it, but it's on my list to read, and it's supposed to be really, 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 really good. Cool. All my Twitter friends say so.
Yeah,
I trust them.
I think it's also pretty relevant to you coming off this past election, in just all of the grassroots organizing that people like Stacey Abrams and other black organizers did in places like Georgia, to make sure everyone's registered, because that state, and I can say this because I'm from Georgia, has a pretty bad history of voter suppression, particularly in the black community. So.
And I think that's kind of what that is, like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Stacey Abrams is actually a romance author. Mm-hmm. She writes under the pen name Salaam Montgomery. So, yay, she's on both lists today.
Cool. So this one definitely checks off a couple boxes on our list. So it's Brittney Morris's book, Slay. I love this book so much. So while it definitely has a social justice aspect to it, it's also a debut novel. It is one of my favorite reads from 2020. I actually even covered it on the Book Jam, which is like our podcast that we do, which Jennifer's going to be a guest star on, that I do with Marissa Hicking from Avon Public Library. But getting back to this book, so the main character is 17-year-old Kira Johnson, and she's an honor student, kind of similar to The Hate You Give. She goes to like a mostly all-white school, so it's her and her sister and her boyfriend and maybe like one other kid, I think. There's like maybe like a handful of black kids in this all predominantly white school. But she lives more in the suburbs, unlike Star from The Hate You Give. Like, she has got a very middle class background. And so she's kind of leading a double life. She has created an online video game called Slay, and it's kind of like the card games like Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon battle cards, but they're cards all based on the black experience. So there's like Mom's Mac and Cheese, there's so many things that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but it's just really cool. And so she's also working with somebody else who she's never met, And so you get like the other person's side of the story too, who's a grad student and who's running all the servers. And this game is like this underground hit, right? Because like it's all black kids are playing it, and they're all really into it. And she's trying to create like the most like even system for whatever. And you know, I'm also an online gamer, so someone creating a community with intention is just huge. Because a lot of our online communities are, a lot of the online gaming communities are not created with that much intention, and they're also very white and they're very homophobic. So she creates the complete opposite of that, right? So it's this great, awesome, welcoming place, but it gets hit in the papers because there's a kid that gets killed, and the argument is over some stuff in the game. And so now it kind of comes into the social justice aspect of it, because it's like, well, do violent video games cause people to kill each other? And the fact that these were like, you know, these were black kids, so there's also the race element of it, and she's just like, she feels personally responsible for it, but then also her story's not being told. And nobody knows that Kira Johnson is actually the, like, person behind the Slay game. Nobody knows. And that's the other thing, is, like, nobody can figure out who it is. But she knows, and so it's just like, does she come forward and tell everybody? Meanwhile, she's getting harassed online by this person that's trying to, like, dox her or expose who she is. So it's just a really, it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. It's very, very good. I love it too. So, and also there's like some black joy in here too that I love, because like with these books, a lot of times you get a lot of like the like gritty like things that are happening, and like those books are really important, but it's also important to see everyday lives of people of all different classes that are also black. So, anyway.
True.
Yes.
Okay. My next book is really, really new. I haven't read it yet either. This is called Punching the Air. It is another novel in verse. We kind of talked about this last week.
Is that a YA book?
It is a YA book, yes. Both of these are YA books, so they do check off that box as well.
Mine was too. Sorry about that.
Yes. So this one is about a boy who is an artist. He gets convicted of a crime he didn't commit, and he is sent to prison. We all know that this is a thing that happens, and, you know, he obviously is black. There's a good story here. And part of it is, when he's in prison, he's kind of turning back towards his art and trying to, like, use that to figure out what's going on with him and how he can move forward and how things can get back to normal, if that ever can be.
Cool. I got 2 more books, and I'm going to talk about them really quickly. The first one is On the Other Side of Freedom, The Case for Hope. This book is by Deray McKesson. This is his like biography memoir, or autobiography actually. And he is one of the organizers in the Ferguson movement, so which kind of started Black Lives Matter. He also is a host for the Pod Save the People podcast. And so Deray basically just breaks down like what it was like being in the movement and like working for change in Ferguson, and you know, still continuing with the struggle. So it's very good, it's very hopeful. He's also just a great dude, so it's pretty cool. So yes, there's that one, and then I have another one because you're looking at me because I got 3 because I was greedy. So this one is a book we cannot keep on the shelf. We actually this is our 3rd copy we're adding, called The Vanishing Half by Bennett. This might sound familiar because everyone's talking about it. Also, her other book, The Mothers, we are doing for Craig and Book Club this month. So The Vanishing Half is about 2 twin sisters, and one of them stays in their small town in, I think it's Alabama. It's somewhere in the south. Anyway, so one of them stays in the town, right, and the other one leaves. And they're lighter skinned, and so the other one that leaves town she does come, anyway, no spoilers, she passes for white, and then she marries a white husband, and then she has kids, and her kids don't know that she's actually not white, that she's black. And so it talks about, like, and there's also, like, you know, the other sister has kids back in the South, and so it's like, will their kids' lives ever intersect? Will they ever meet? What does this mean? So this is a different type of social book that talks about the nuance of what it means to be black, and also what it means to like pass in white society and the racism that accompanies that. So there we go. You want to talk about romance now?
Always.
Okay, let's talk about romance.
Alright, romance. We picked. What did we pick? Enemies to lovers. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I've talked about this book before. I love it. It came out in like November. So it's Alexandria, Bellefluer is written in the stars. So this is definitely an enemies to lovers story. They have the worst first date in the history of romance. It's kind of based on Pride and Prejudice loosely. So Darcy is like an actuarian. She's very into numbers. She's very into facts. I can't remember the other woman's name. Elle, thank you. Elle, meanwhile, like runs like an online horoscope thing from like a friend website with like her best friend from college, and it's just a complete bisexual disaster. Like so much so that she accidentally spills red wine all over Darcy's vintage dress on their first date, and Darcy's just like, I didn't even want to come on this date. Like my brother convinced me this was a bad idea. So they just kind of get off to the worst start. And you also have this person that believes in fate and like horoscopes and all this stuff. And another person's like, no, it's all numbers. Like my whole job is like predicting when things will happen. So what happens when those two collide? And it's also a fake dating, which I think is another square. Yeah, and it's a really cute story and it's very heartwarming. I loved it. And this is the first book, and I think the second one comes out sometime in summer, yeah. So
Is it Behind the Moon? Is that the one it's called?
Sure, I can't remember. I have so many book facts, and they've all scrambled up, and now they're not facts, they're just like book blurb ideas that could or could not be true.
That is true. That one that one also checks off the LGBTQ plus main character.
Right.
So that checks off at least 3 squares.
Yes. I picked all LGBT romance because I don't like to read straight romance. As a gay lady.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so my first pick is probably my first enemies to lovers story that I remember. It's Anne and Gables. How do you not love Anne and Gilbert? Oh, Gilbert. Anyways, so Anne is very smart and has a temper to match her fiery red hair, which she does not like. And Gilbert is also very smart, but they clash. She holds a grudge as big as Arya Stark, and it's fantastic.
Doesn't she break her blackboard over his head?
She does, because he calls her carrots.
That's right.
And she's like, no! And she gets in big trouble.
Yeah, so this one is Melissa Brayden, who's one of my favorite romance writers. It's called To the Moon and Back. This is a great enemies to lovers, because, like, man, they hate each other so much. Like, and Written in the Stars, they're just kind of, like, annoyed with each other, but this one, they hate each other. So, Lauren Prescott always wanted to be an actress, but she ends up becoming a stage manager instead. And so she's very type A, she's very organized, like, you know, color-coded and like, Post-it notes are her jam. Like, she's very, and then part of the reason why their productions always run so well, their theater, is because she's so organized. She has everybody on their marks, she has, you know, she's on tech, she's on the actors, she's got it, right? But then Carly Daniel is like this starlet that needs to go do some other things because she has partied and crashed her whole career. And so it's kind of like, was it rehab's like too passe, and so now she's like, her agent's like you need to go do an indie film or something, or like go do theater. You need to go do theater. And she's just like, I don't know how to do theater, like I just do movies. And she's like, well, you're gonna learn. So she gets sent to work in this production at this theater in somewhere in the Midwest that I cannot remember. I read this 6 months ago. Anyway, so Carly's just very go with the flow, like, oh, I showed up a half hour late, it's fine. That drives Lauren up the wall, because Lauren's like, no, time is money right now, and we need to make sure this production opens on time. We can't have you being late all the time. And so, meanwhile, Carly's like, why don't you come drink with us and, like, loosen up? And Lauren's like, no, I don't have time for you. Or that, and you need to get your act together. And, like, at one point, Carly almost gets fired. And so eventually, they kind of start to finally, like, you know, part of the reason they butt heads, of course, is because they're attracted to each other. But they're like, no, she's horrible. Like, the other one's horrible, right? And it's so great. So what's your next one?
Alright, mine is a young adult, today, tonight, and tomorrow. So this is about a couple of enemies. His name is, well, she calls him McNair. That's his last name. And she is Rowan. And they have been rivals for the entire high school career. So this takes place in like a 24-hour time period. It's in Seattle. It's the last day of school, and their school has like this theater can't even think of theater, has this school-wide scavenger hunt tradition.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yes. So they, so it's like it's half scavenger hunt, half like assassination game where you have to like kill the person by like taking a bracelet off of their wrist. And then whoever wins like this big prize. I think it's like $5,000. So they never really, they've been talking a lot, trash talking each other a lot. But they've never really sat down and had like really deep conversations. And they do on this day, and they're both in line for valedictorian, and they don't know yet who wins until today, and so it's a very interesting book. And of course, as they talk more, they understand each other more, and they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have been enemies this whole time. It's very good.
Interesting. So my last one is George Beer's The Do-Over. So what is a better enemies to lover story than someone who was your high school bully, who comes back into your life like 15, 20 years later?
Ooh.
Right? So, let's see. Bella Hunt is now a teacher. She's living a successful career. Like, she's fine. She's living a good life. She's fine, right? But then, all of a sudden, the mean girl that bullied her comes back into her classroom because Easton Evans is there to teach about conflict resolution. Also, what's the biggest irony of, like, your bully... Your high school bully is like teaching conflict resolution skills to your high school class that you teach. Like, can we talk about some irony?
That's funny.
I know. My school bully is now a school counselor. I have a lot of doubts about her. Anyway, but this book doesn't have doubts. This book is awesome. So it is definitely the whole, like, maybe you can change, and it's for the better. And maybe things are different. Maybe you didn't know the whole story behind why that other person was so mean. So, and maybe there were some mixed signals and crosswires. Who knows? They'll work it out. You gotta read it. Alright, so that was The Do-Over. So that has been Get Booked for this week.
But it's true, there are so many books to read, and so little time to read them.
Jen bringing out the fun socks.
Fun socks.
Who
doesn't have fun socks?
I just have regular Bombas socks. I didn't wear my fun ones. I have Big Bird socks now.
Oh, you should wear them next time.
I will try to remember. I will try to remember.
We will see you next week.
On Get Booked.